Hello, Jeff. How are you?
Great, Rick. How you doing?
I'm doing good. Yeah, and want to, excited about this is our first ever podcast together.
Yay!
Yeah. And we're still trying to come up with a name, and we're playing around with different things. We right now think we're going to call it the Meet Hope Podcast. Conversations about faith
and hope.
Yeah. So that'd be fun. We're here in the digital cafe at Hope. So if you hear some noises in the background, it may be kids running through the building, might be parents picking someone up, staff moving through.
Yeah.
So you might hear some sounds, and we have
typical Thursday afternoon.
Yeah, we have Ashley and Andrew out here behind cameras, and we're excited that they can be here with us. And we're hoping that there's some listeners and viewers who are
thousands.
Thousands, yes. So this is going to be a big deal. Yeah. So this is really interesting. It's the new era of ministry, right? This digital age. I'm sure you remember taking Podcast 101 in seminary.
It was, a required class. Not at all.
Yeah, that was a required class. And so we hope that as you're listening, you guys enjoy our fumblings as we figure this thing out.
Yeah.
But we have some exciting things, and we're looking forward to sharing what's going on. And the reason we want to do a podcast is we want to broadcast an exciting new challenge that we're about to embark on. It's a 3-year ministry campaign, and it's a challenge for the whole Hope community. You want to share what that title is, what we're calling that?
Yeah, so we're calling it Let's Grow, and that's a reference to really what our core business is. We talk about all the time that we are in the business of making disciples, and disciples as individuals, followers of Christ, we're all called to spiritual growth, to become increasingly mature. And so the growth is about your growth as an individual Christ follower, and together as a community of faith, our growth as we move forward together to be the body of Christ.
Yeah, and that isn't new for the church, and it isn't new for Hope. And even now, our current tagline, one church, two expressions, and growing influence. Yeah. So before we get too far into there, we want to look at how we got here, right? So we're kind of on the other side of the pandemic. And you remember that early in the weeks of the pandemic, I think it may have been in the first or second week of the pandemic, I read an article that I passed on to you called Leading Beyond the Blizzard. And I know you remember that article. And we passed it on to the lead team. We passed it on to staff and others as well, because when I read it first, it was a disturbing article. It talked about a months-long pandemic, right? And it talked about global changes. It talked about economic hardships, and man, it was really disturbing and depressing.
And we were only a couple weeks in at that point, and we were thinking, like, what?
Yes, is this for real?
Yeah.
It turned out to be really a prophetic article, right? And I know at some point during the early on, we made a decision as a staff and as a lead team and as a church that we were going to look at this as more than a 2-week pandemic.
Right.
And it really has turned out to help us as we move forward through this. And, the article spoke about 3 likelihoods, and it turned out that they were not only possibilities, but they became, I think, realities or movements, as I've been calling them as well. And the first one is the idea of relief, right? That in March 2020, the world needed relief.
Yeah.
Right? We had people dying at a fast rate. We had the economy had stalled. People were home from work, figuring out all the things that had to do with the pandemic and trying not to get sick.
Right. Yeah, businesses closing. It was,
And so, and Hope made a quick pivot then, and we focused on a few things, and you know what those are. Why don't you share those things that we focused on right away coming into that pandemic?
Yeah, so our own relief efforts we were just concerned about caring for our congregation and making sure that folks were okay and not alone. And so as a church, we did a number of things. We had a phone campaign where we called every household at the church. And sometimes we talked to people, sometimes we were just leaving messages, but we reached out to every household to let them know, hey, we're here. If there's anything we can be doing for you, please let us know. We had a letter campaign where we sent out handwritten letters to every household. That's when we started the weekly or the daily prayer email.
Right.
That started right in that same time frame. And so it was all about just bringing some level of relief to folks. Oh, another thing that was really cool is we had a couple of folks who came to us. They put together a fund of $10,000 and said, we know that there's going to be some small business owners here that may not have any work, and we want you to be able to use this money to help these folks. And wow, what a great relief that was for a number of our people here who had small businesses that we were able to provide some income to.
And did you mention the food pantry? The food pantry
took
off as well, right? And that was a primary way for us to, one of the primary ways we showed relief or brought relief to people, right?
100%.
Yeah. So that was the first movement, and that was from March through several months of the pandemic. And then the next movement that this article talked about was recovery. And recovery, I would say, was like from somewhere in 2020 through 2021. And while the relief was kind of like a blizzard where we kind of all hunker down, right? When the storm comes, you kind of wait it out. The way that this article described recovery was that it's like a winter season, and there's like this season of storms that we go through. And so not only did we have COVID, but during that time of 2020 and 2021, we dealt with the protests of the Black Lives Movement. We dealt with the masks, no masks issues, the vaccines, the election results and election protests, and all those things were taking place during that same period. And here at Hope during recovery, we were figuring out how to do online ministry, how to do it well, and how many weeks. We thought we were 2 weeks, right? 2 weeks. 2 weeks behind a camera turned into how many?
60 weeks.
60.
15 months of nobody in the building, certainly on Sundays, and very few people during the week. And it was initially, Rick, you recall, there was, I think, 4 or 5 of us here on a Sunday, you, me, and at that time it was Steve Hoadley. Doing some music. Eventually we brought Josh in, and Marilyn was doing the tech.
Behind the cameras, Our very first one was on Marilyn's iPhone. Remember that? That was our very first service in March.
And we could, at that time, and again, it's hard to remember what that was like, but when we first heard about it, thinking, oh my gosh, we're going to close for 2 weeks with no Sunday service. What's that going to be like? And so to your point, it was 60 weeks of no in-person worship. So the recovery then was figuring out how do we do something we had been doing at that point for 30 years, which was in-person worship, and at the same time do a online version of that. And churches were across the country were trying to figure out the best practices to do that. We made a decision at that point that we were going to live stream and not do 2 different services. And I think that was a really important decision. We knew it was going to be important at the time, and we're still living into that.
Right. And during that recovery, we focused on themes like community, unity, and it's better to be loving than right. All of that, because we knew that not only was the church going through these experiences, but each individual was having a different experience connected to all of these social issues that were taking place, as well as the pandemic. Right. So the first phase there is relief, then was recovery, and then the third. And
just not to interrupt here, but the recovery also involved how we were going to be doing ministry going forward.
Right. Yes. Okay.
So our children's ministry, had been all online. So how do we reintroduce an in-person children's ministry? Our youth ministry had to figure that out. Our small groups ministry had to figure that out.
Right.
And so that's we're still kind of in that late recovery phase,
and that's where, and we've talked about how these relief, recovery, and reformation is this third movement that it's not, there's no clear lines, that you kind of move in and out of each of those. And so as we continue through recovery, we also are looking at how can we reform things and change things. And so that's kind of 2022 and beyond. And the article described that as like an ice age, that as the seasons have changed, it's turned out that the landscape is different.
Yes.
And so now that the landscape is different, it's a permanent change, and how it's a new normal.
Yeah.
So how do we grow things in this new landscape? How do we grow things in this new climate? And that's where we are excited that hybrid ministry and hybrid worship, that being physical and digital, we think is one of those ways that's going to grow in this new landscape. And it's a way for us to grow influence and expand our influence. So that's kind of where we've been, right? So do you want to move quickly now into where we're going? And what I would talk to you about is in a message you gave a few months ago now, I guess it would be, you talked about attendance and engagement. And I wrote it down because I thought it was really poignant, really important, and I really think it speaks to where we're headed in this next era. Do you know what you said about attendance and engagement?
Yeah, so attendance is the way we grow, and engagement is the way we influence. And so, this idea of attending a worship service, attending a small group, being present, as we attend to things, we support them, we are encouraged by them, we grow through them, and so forth. But that's the importance. It's not that we as a church want to have big counts.
It's not about counting. Right?
Yeah, no, it really is about growth.
Yeah, I would even call it the community piece.
Yeah,
right? That we attend to community in a sense, right?
That's a great way.
And then engagement.
Yeah, so the engagement is how we serve, and how. It's the way we volunteer, and the ways that we serve outside of the church, and that's how people influence others.
Yes.
So when you're volunteering here at Hope, you're having an influence on all of the people who are touched by that ministry. And when you're outside of the church and serving in a whole host of different ways, but you're doing it as a Christ follower and motivated by a love for God, you are having a level of influence in that way.
Right, and that's how we stay connected. Right,
Yeah.
when you're engaged, you're going to be connected.
Yeah, for sure.
So we find those to be very important metrics for our progress and our growth. And so the staff has been working really hard on systems to better measure those things. And we'll be rolling some of that stuff out in the future. We're looking forward to that. But in the next few years, we've landed on an important opportunity, an important moment for Hope. And that's what we're calling this 3-year campaign, Let's Grow.
Yeah.
Right. And it's this idea of one church, 2 expressions, and growing influence, right? That we're building community and connection as a church. And why is that so important at this time?
The growing influence?
Yeah. Why would it be important for us to do this kind of campaign now?
Oh, yeah. Well, there's so many ways to talk about that. I think the thing for me is we have been separated for so long and struggling really since March of 2020. And honestly, and this, the church as a whole, not just Hope Church, but the church across the country has been struggling with declining attendance and declining influence. And we saw, not dramatically, but we began to see some of that here at Hope. And then we went through the pandemic and all of those other things that we've named, and it's really been devastating to the church, again, across the country. And so as we're coming out of this pandemic season, we wanted to give people a reason to be excited again about the church. And to re-envision, to reimagine what the church is all about, and not just the church as an institution, but their involvement and what it means to be a community of Christ followers. And so for us to help define that and to create some energy around that and create some metrics around measuring that, we thought would be really helpful to get us back up and running again, not just mucking along.
Right. Yeah, and I this is not in anything we prepared, but I was listening to a podcast this morning, and something you said, it was exactly what this other church leadership professional was saying, is that while church attendance continues to be a struggle, and across the nation, people who attend church now attend once a month. And I was when I first heard that, I was really surprised. So it's lowered from what it used to be, which was like 1.5 times, 1.7 times, whatever that number was,
right.
That it's actually gotten less. And I was happy to hear that I don't think that's the reality for our Hope community.
No.
But then secondly is, he said, coming out of the pandemic, the best thing a church can do is begin something new. And I was thinking right away to this campaign, and I'm like, oh, we are right where we should be, beginning this new campaign and this new season, just to energize people. And so I'm excited about it, and I think it's going to be a neat thing.
And everybody has a role to play. That's the exciting thing, So this isn't just about one ministry or another ministry or a few select people. This is something everybody can be, and we want to see involved.
Yeah, and so we're not going to talk about that till the next episode. But
teaser.
Yes, it is a big teaser. So we want to make sure everyone's listening to the next episode. Yeah. But I do want to, we're calling this the Meet Hope podcast, and so we're going to end each podcast with a question. And so, Jeff, for you today is, what has you hopeful today?
I am so hopeful right now as Sunday mornings come, and knowing all of this other, hard stuff that's going on in the church, and watching these young families coming into the church. The church is now 32 years old, and to see these next generations of people coming in. And the kids are excited, and they're doing their thing and running around, and then seeing the numbers that we have online, the online attendance, it just is thrilling to me that this church has stayed together through these difficult years, and now new growth is beginning to happen even before we launch this initiative. Yeah. So I'm jazzed. I'm really hopeful.
That's great. And so, listen, we hope you've enjoyed our first episode of the Meet Hope podcast.
I enjoyed it.
Yeah, I did too. We're going to do more of these conversations about faith and hope. So we want you to watch or listen next in 2 weeks. That's our next podcast will be in 2 weeks. And we want to encourage you to share it on social with as many people as possible. You can find us across all social media platforms at Meet Hope Church. Our next episode, we're going to be talking about hope strategies, which we've talked about before, but we're going to talk about what makes them strong, and we're going to introduce 2 challenges, and so we'll get some more details around this ministry campaign for 2023 and beyond. And so that's a wrap. Good work.
See you guys soon.